In 2022, the U.S. experienced 18 weather or climate events that caused at least $1 billion in damage. In total, the price tag is over $165 billion, according to a recent report from NOAA. That's the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Adam Smith is an applied climatologist and economist at NOAA. Adam, welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So what types of weather disasters did we experience in 2022?
2022 had not only a high count, but a high diversity of weather and climate disasters. So from the drought and heat wave in the western and central part of the country, to the hurricanes that impacted Florida, to the floods in eastern Kentucky, to the winter storm event and the cold wave that happened across much of the country around Christmas time, even the wildfire season out west, not as bad as recent years, but still several $1 billion of damage. And hail, tornado, and high wind events, thunderstorm type events across much of the country. So in total, 18 events and $165 billion. So it was quite an active year.
So which weather events were the costliest last year?
The costliest events last year would be Hurricane Ian that impacted Florida with storm surge, high wind, and heavy rain and flooding well inland, over $100 billion, the third most costly hurricane on record in the United States. But the second most costly event may surprise people is actually the drought and heat wave across the western and central parts of the country, from reduced hydropower in the west to reduced commerce along the Mississippi River due to low water levels, to agricultural impacts and livestock impacts. That was $22.2 billion, the most costly drought in a decade.
So why are weather events becoming more expensive? Is it simply that they're more severe?
It's a combination of factors. So we have more exposure, so population, assets in harm's way. That would be the wildland urban interface in the west, or the river floodplains, or of course the coasts where people like to live. So we have high exposure, high vulnerability as well. So how we build, where we build, lack of building codes plays into that. But of course, climate change is supercharging many of these different extremes that may lead to billion-dollar disasters. For example, in the west, the mega drought leads to longer wildfire seasons. In the east, we have a warmer atmosphere. It holds more water vapor. We've had more urban flooding events and river basin flooding events in recent years. And hurricane impacts. We've had, in 5 out of the last 6 years, Category 4 or Category 5 hurricanes impact the United States, which is the highest frequency on record dating back to 1851.
And Adam, it's not just about money. These disasters cost lives too. So how deadly was 2022?
Yes, 2022 was the 8th most deadly year dating back to 1980 at 474 fatalities. In fact, we're working with CDC to make sure our heat numbers are capturing all of the heat-related deaths, because sometimes there's data latency. So there's just so many extremes across so many different parts of the countries that takes lives and livelihoods. So we need to learn from these extremes, best practices, and implement better standards so we can mitigate future damages, because we know these extremes will continue as we move into the future.
And historically, what are the trends that you're seeing besides that they keep getting deadlier and more expensive?
So the United States not only has the highest count of these billion-dollar weather and climate-related disasters, all inflation adjusted to present-day dollars, highest amount than any other country in the world, because again, the exposure, the vulnerability, and the influence of climate change. But we also have the highest diversity of these different types of extremes. So no matter what part of the country you live in, you likely have a combination of hazards you should be aware of and understand what's happened in the past, because it could, of course, happen again in the future. So we want to plan and harden our infrastructure to have a stronger, more resilient future ahead of us.
And your report only measures weather events that cost more than $1 billion. So why is that, and what goes into determining cost? Is it the cost to rebuild?
So yes, so these billion-dollar disasters account for about 80 to 85% of the full cost distribution for all weather and climate events across the United States. So it's a useful metric, even though it's a bit arbitrary. In fact, we even inflate sub-billion-dollar events into present-day dollars and add those to the time series that often have happened in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s earlier when, due to inflation expenses. But as far as the assets, damage to homes, businesses, government buildings like schools, the contents of these structures, time element losses like business interruption, damage to agriculture, infrastructure, roads, levees, systems, electrical grids, even military bases, wildfires, fighting suppression costs. There are 15 or 16 different asset classes that account for total direct losses. That would be insured and uninsured losses, but we also cannot account for things like the physical and mental health care related costs with disasters, or environmental degradation costs that are non-market losses. And finally, the supply chain ripple effects outside of a disaster region, we also do not account for that. So this is a conservative baseline.
So that's what I was going to say. This $165 billion is probably pretty low.
Yeah, depending on how you would account for it, it would be a conservative baseline. In fact, the winter storm cold wave event that happened around Christmas time was quite an impactful event, taking lives and costing billions of damage. We haven't even added that to the 165 billion because we're still calculating it. So the cost figure for 2022 will actually continue to rise a bit.
And is that your, I mean, quickly, your prediction for 2023? Is that it's just going to get worse?
Well, so 5 of the last 6 years, 2017 through 2022, with the exception 2019, we've been over $100 billion. And in 8 consecutive years, we've had 10 or more of these billion-dollar disaster events. So the trends are going in the wrong direction. And for 2023, I would expect something similar, unfortunately.
All right, Adam, thanks so much for being on the program.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on any future Government Matters interviews.